Hi Year 8, it's Mrs. Reed and welcome to our poetry lesson where today we're going to continue exploring the poem Nothing's Changed. Today we're going to be looking at language more closely. In fact, we're interested in how the poet uses juxtaposition and symbolism. We'll be continuing to build on our big question, which is how Africa helps us understand how it feels to experience segregation. And we know in our last lesson, we explored the context and the narrative of the poem. Today, though, we want to look further at the point of the poem. So how the poet might use certain techniques in order to argue for social change or to help us understand the lives and experiences of people from different cultures and traditions. The first thing I'd like you to do, though, is to reflect on what you already know. So can you write the numbers 1 to 4 in the margin? And we are going to be matching up the poet and the poem to some of the big ideas that are explored in those poems. So in a moment, I'd like you to pause the video and I'd like you to match the numbers to the letters. So tell me which poet and poem and then which big idea that this links to. Okay, pause the video and complete that task now. Brilliant. Now you've checked what you know, let's check your answers against mine. So I have the poem Caged Bird. One of the big ideas is arguing for social change by highlighting oppression and inequality. In the poem Chimney Sweep, this also argued for social change by exposing the horrific treatment of the poor. Number 3, in the poem Island Man, this conveyed the experience of someone moving from one country to another. And in the poem Nothing's Changed, we see the experience of segregation and the feelings of anger and frustration associated with it. Okay, mark your answers, give yourself a mark out of 4, and if you got any incorrect, please write down the name of the poet, the poem, and the big ideas explored. If you need to do that now, pause the video. If not, let's carry on to today's lesson. Okay, before we start, I want to just check your understanding of the poem, Nothing's Changed. So I want to know, does Africa's poem highlight the difference in the types of food in South Africa? Does it expose the injustice of apartheid and racial segregation? Or does it demonstrate that the speaker is angry with the way that he's been treated? So, you can show me this on your fingers, 1, 2, and 3. Which of these is really the big idea that's being explored here? On the count of 3, hold up your fingers to show me. 3, 2, 1. Okay, so you should have held up here, hopefully, number 2. It's really this that's the big idea. The poem aims to expose the injustice and the suffering caused as a result of the political agenda of apartheid, and how this racial segregation leads to not just inequality, but feelings of anger and of frustration that the speaker is unable to have control over the situation. Okay, so in order to explore the poem in more depth, we need to make sure we're clear on the term juxtaposition. Now, hopefully this isn't a new term to you. I'm sure you've come across it in previous lessons in English. But it's worthwhile recapping what that technique is and how we can talk about it. So juxtaposition is the placement of things in a text together or closely side by side. so that we're able to see the differences between them. So those differences become emphasised by presenting contrasting ideas and images next to one another. Let's look at the pictures at the bottom, for example. Can you see here how these two pictures of then and now are being placed side by side? So you might just want to articulate what do we see in those pictures? So what does this juxtaposition help to emphasise? Why don't you say that out loud now? Okay, so you may have something like this, that the juxtaposition here helps the audience or the reader to see the changes that have occurred due to global warming. In this case, it was a photographer who had chosen to juxtapose these photographs so that the audience can see the differences. We're going to look at this in the poem today, how the poet or writer might juxtapose two contrasting images in order to highlight the difference. Now, before we go on, it might be worthwhile revising the poem. So today we're going to be looking, as I've said, at two techniques, juxtaposition and symbolism. We're going to focus on stanzas 3, 5, 6 and 7. So you will need to read back through the poem again, just to be clear on which stanzas we're talking about. So I suggest that you pause the video here and reread the poem in full. Okay, so our next step is to explore how juxtaposition, the placement of contrasting images side by side, is used in this poem. Well, yesterday we explored the narrative, and we identified really that the speaker describes seeing two very different places to eat. The first is an exclusive restaurant. This is the restaurant that has appeared now in District 6, the speaker's former home. If you remember the context, we learned that the people living in District 6 were forcibly removed and their homes were demolished. So this exclusive restaurant appears years later, and it is somewhat of an insult, I suppose, to the speaker, because it's sitting there and it seems to be something out of place, kind of inconsistent with the place that he once called home. What's interesting in the poem is that juxtaposed against this rather exclusive restaurant is the working man's cafe. This represents a poorer part of the community, but it certainly seems to be a place where the speaker feels more comfortable. In the box at the bottom, you can see I've taken a range of short quotations from the poem. I would like you to divide them into the two contrasting images. Do they describe the exclusive restaurant, or do they describe the working man's cafe? So I would like you to pause the video and complete the grid, placing each of the quotations in the correct side. This should take you no more than 5 minutes. Can you do that now, please? Good. Now that you've done that, I would like you to add a sentence to the bottom of each restaurant or cafe. So underneath the exclusive restaurant, I would like you to tell me what it represents. In your mind at this point, why do you think he has presented it in this way? Do the same for the working man's cafe. What do you think the images here represent? Okay, Let's look at your answers against mine, and you might wish to add to your notes. If you have a different coloured pen, you could use that to add if you wish. Okay, so in the new exclusive restaurant, I've included the quotes such as new, white only, brash with glass, upmarket, linen, hawk cuisine, single rose, guard at the gatepost. I think that this really represents division. This restaurant, which the speaker cannot go in, by the way, he has to be outside of the glass looking into the window, shows that there is a division in both race and class. It also seems to stand as a symbol of wealth and affluence. You would have to have a lot of money in order to eat in this restaurant. The sign, there is no sign, but the speaker talks of a sign that could say something like white people or whites only. This suggests that only white people are welcome here. So it really is a representation of segregation and apartheid. The way that the speaker talks about the restaurant presents it negatively. In fact, we're told it is brash with glass and that it squats, that there's a guard at the gatepost. So these things make it seem unfriendly and even unnatural. Juxtaposed against this is the working man's cafe, where we have bunny chows, plastic tables. You might spit a little on the floor and wipe your fingers on your jeans. It's takeaway food. You can take it with you. Again, this is used to show the division in race and class by the way in which it's contrasted with the exclusive upper-class restaurant. It seems to be more a symbol of poverty, but it doesn't seem to be represented negatively. So it might represent ideas of community where the speaker feels welcome. He can go along and behave in the way that he has always done, something that seems quite natural and just part of who he is. In fact, he says, it's in the bone. Like, it's just something that's part of you, part of your culture and your country and the way that you do things. I certainly think that the working man's cafe is presented more positively in the eyes of the speaker, that it perhaps is representative of District 6 as he used to know it and the place in which he grew up. Okay, so we are going to have a go at answering the big question by writing about juxtaposition in the poem. I have a modelled answer on the left-hand side, which I'll talk you through, and then I would like you to have a go, but you will write your analysis about the poem Nothing's Changed. Okay, looking at my answer. So my one describes the poem Caged Bird. In fact, you can see that I've started with the name of the poet, and I've used juxtaposes here as a verb, so that the poet juxtaposes the images of the caged and the free bird, and I say why they're doing it, in order to highlight racial inequality. So this straight away gets to the heart of the big ideas in the poem. I'm then going to look at what the two contrasting images are, and perhaps then get a better understanding of the way in which they've been placed side by side. So the image of the free bird who leaps on the back of the wind, you see I'm missing a quotation mark there to show that it's been taken directly from the text. So I've used two quotes. The image of a free bird who leaps on the back of the wind represents choice and liberation. Now I know this from when I've studied the poem previously and from my notes. And I'm going to explain then that it is being deliberately placed alongside the caged bird, the bird that stalks down its narrow cage, which to me emphasises entrapment and oppression. Okay, so just a way here to explore juxtaposition by choosing two contrasting images and saying what each of them presents. Let's have a go at doing that for the poem Nothing's Changed. I want to know, what does Africa, the poet, juxtapose the images of, and why? And then can you choose 2 quotations from your grid to show why they're being placed side by side and what they might represent. Pause the video and complete that task now. Okay, well done. It's quite tricky to check back through this response, so I'm going to suggest at the end of the lesson that you do send a copy of this to your teacher. Let's have a look at one more technique then for today, and that is the use of symbolism. You might remember that we talked about symbolism in a previous lesson, and that we recapped the definition of it yesterday. So we use a symbol to represent and explore a wider or bigger idea in the text. So I'm going to suggest to you that in this poem, the poet uses the image of glass as a symbol. Can you see through the quotations that I've chosen on the left-hand side that the imagery of glass is repeated multiple times? We're told that the expensive restaurant is brash with glass. He describes looking through the window and its clear panes. He even explains that at the end he backs from the glass boy again, so that staring through the window in this way transports him back to a childhood memory. And finally, that image at the end where his hands burn for a stone or a bomb to shiver down the glass, presents to us this highly destructive image of a glass being broken. So I want us to explore what we think the imagery of glass might symbolise in the poem. So here are 3 questions for you to complete first before we go through the answers. Okay, number 1, I would like you to jot down at least 3 connotations that you associate with glass. What other ideas or meanings might it represent? I want you to think about why glass might be used as a symbol of segregation in the poem. How might it link to the context we've discussed? And finally, I really want you to focus on that final quotation from the last stanza. What ideas might be conveyed in this destructive imagery of glass being broken or the speaker wishing to shiver and break down the glass? Pause the video here and spend 5 or 6 minutes exploring the symbolism of glass. Okay, so I'm going to talk you through some of my ideas. You can compare them to your own and please add to your notes as you go. So when we're looking at the use of glass in the poem, I might start to think of a pane of glass, particularly a window, for example, as some kind of a barrier. So it might be a barrier in your home, for example, that protects you from the outside. Yeah, so our window keeping the cold air, for example, on the outside and keeping you warm inside your house. So it might provide you with some kind of form of protection, for example. But it could also be seen as something that divides. It creates some kind of a barrier and division between a group of people. We might say that some connotations of glass are ideas of fragility, that it is an easily breakable material. Within the poem then, we might see that glass is used to symbolise ideas of segregation, of things being kept separate and apart. So therefore, it becomes a symbol of apartheid. Furthermore, when we look at the image at the end of the poem, this kind of destructive imagery, quite violent imagery of the bomb, something to break and shatter the glass, a stone perhaps. This really helps to get to the heart of the speaker's emotions. There is this sense of pain and suffering, and even this anger and frustration, and a desire for revenge. Perhaps this person wishes to break or to smash the barrier, the glass that divides people, the thing that keeps him outside of the restaurant, just being able to look in at it through the glass. Okay, if you haven't done so already, I would suggest you pause the video here and just add some of these notes to your page. Okay, so this is our last activity for today, where we're going to be trying to write about symbolism. I'm going to use the example from the poem Caged Bird, and I would like you to write your example using the poem Nothing's Changed. Okay, so I'm going to start again with the name of the writer, Angelou, and I'm going to say what they do. So in this poem, she uses the extended metaphor of the caged bird to symbolise oppression and inequality. So you need to do the same in your analysis. You need to say, what does Africa use the repeated images of glass to symbolise? Next, we're going to go on to choose a line from the poem. I've chosen this line, but the line "his wings are clipped and tied, and feet are tied" suggests that the bird is prevented from being free and is trapped. So you will need to choose a line from the poem that uses glass and what it might suggest. Then I want you to zoom in. Look at my example. I've used the phrase. In particular, the word tied is powerful because it suggests being restrained and restricted. I'm now going to go on then to link this to the effect on the reader. So here I'm going to use an ing ending verb, helping the reader to understand. So helping the reader to understand the suffering caused due to racial segregation. Can we see that there are some similarities and links between the two poems? Even though they're talking about different countries and different time periods, we can see that the ideas around segregation and inequality are the same. Okay, I want you to have a go at analysing symbolism in the poem Nothing's Changed. Tell me, what does the glass symbolise? Choose a line to zoom in on, and then finally explore one single word and link to the big idea. What does it help the reader to understand? Pause the video and complete that task now, please. Okay, well done. So today we have been exploring that question, how a poem might be used to help the reader to understand the experiences of someone else in a different country perhaps, or a different culture, a different time period, that it might help us to understand someone else's emotions and experiences. You've done really well in applying two complex terms in English, juxtaposition and symbolism. So my advice to you at this point is to end the video, to check back through the two examples that you've written, and when you're happy with them, take a photograph and send them over to your teacher. Great work, guys. Well done.